Welcome to Paranormal Triage, Pursuing the Spiritual Awakening podcast.
Hey, this is Paranormal Triage. I'm Brenda, and Ryan is not here today, so I'm a lone wolf. I'm not used to that, so he's off fighting fire today. Our little town of Shasta Lake City broke a 12-acre fire, and we have a lot of wind today. And we're a small department, so we don't have the help that we need, but they got a wrap on it. So, anyway, so we went to I think we posted that we went to Willow Creek because we were going to go find Bigfoot, and we are going to do a podcast on that pretty soon. So that'll be our next big project. I don't know how well we'll do because we're not really versed in Bigfoot, but it's a very interesting story. So we went to the museum that has all the pictures of the original Bigfoot photo by Patterson. I think that's his last name. And actually, there was more to all the story than I realized. You know, I knew a little bit of it, but I'd never really been to that museum. And they actually have a lot of cast of a lot of different things. And yeah, it was really cool. So we'll be looking forward to sharing that. That'll probably be a couple weeks out. Next Sunday, we'll have our other podcasts that we're doing. And right now, I can't think of their names. So sorry about that, guys. But we'll be doing that podcast as well. It'll be at 5:00, and we'll be sending out some promos for that. But other than that, we're just doing our normal thing, you know, fighting fire, trying to do our investigations in between everything and all of that good stuff. Today we have a fun guest on. His name's Colin, and their podcast is full of paranormal BS. I think they've been together quite a while in different aspects of their lives and doing different things. So it'll be a fun conversation to see what they have to say about the paranormal. So we'll do a little intro, and then we'll bring Colin on. Oh, maybe. What are we doing here? Well, hopefully you can hear that, because for some reason I have no volume right now. Oh, there we go. All right, Colin, we're just going to bring you right on. Something happened. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, for some reason I had that all set up today. I ran it 500 times, and for some reason it didn't work. So, Colin, my name's Brenda. Yes. How you doing?
I'm wonderful. I am elated. I'm honored. I'm a little gassy. So we are, in excellent hands.
All right, sweet. So I did kind of look into you guys a little bit, like I do with everybody, to see where your history is. Watched a few of your podcasts, and they were fun. I kind of got a retro feeling from you guys. So it's kind of fun to listen to how you guys banter back and forth. It was kind of like old school radio. So why don't you tell us how you got into this? And I know we talked a little bit before you came on, but just kind of tell people out there how you kind of came into this field of work.
So I, coming into full of paranormal, the podcast itself, that I really have to give credit a lot of it to Jess, who is my co-host. Really, it started with so she has never seen the Conjuring movies before.
Okay.
And so we said, okay, well, let's sit down, let's watch them together. And then we sat down, and like her and I would just, after the movie, we would start talking about Ed and Lorraine Warren. And I'm a huge fan of Ed and Lorraine, and she was kind of going, well, there's this and maybe there's that, but do you really believe this? Or is this just about the money that they're raking in? And we would go on for hours about it. And then Jess sat there one night and she goes, we should turn this into a podcast. And I was like, okay, I like where we're going. And then we tried some things out. Now, obviously, like one of the first things is like trying to find a really good title, because when it comes to podcasting in the world, the paranormal community itself, you know, everyone, their grandmother, their next door neighbor, their cat, like everyone has a podcast, and that's great because that allows us these views into the outside world. And we get to hear a lot of things from other people. So I love that everyone has a podcast, but I was like, obviously, you know, you want something that stands out amongst the paranormal community itself. And that normally starts with a title. And we sat on a couple of things for a hot minute. And I think I'm the one who suggested, I came up, because Jess kept saying, you know, well, you're the believer. And she was like, I'm the skeptic. And I was like, yeah, it's a lot of BS. And I was like, wait, what about paranormal BS? And then we added the full of, and, we sat on that for a little bit. And then we sat there and said, you know what? It sounds really good because it's kind of a brain teaser, right? Like, the BS part, people are thinking where you're just going to be BSing the whole time. But then when we sit there and say, I'm a believer, and then I'm a skeptic, it's like, oh, the B and okay. And now it all just kind of falls together. So we did originally try something, and we didn't really like it. We felt that we were missing something. So we ended up sitting on it for about a year. And then at the beginning of this year of 2026, for Christmas, Bree, who is our producer / moderator, as a sister, they ended up getting me a piece of the Amityville house for Christmas.
Okay.
A little piece of the window. And it just kind of like hit me in the brain. I said, you know what? I really want to sit down and crack this podcast algorithm, right? We have a title. And then Jess said, why don't we debate? And I said, what do you mean? And she was like, well, I'm a skeptic and you're a believer. Why don't we go with that? Like, you hit me with something and they were like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, you guys just got me this piece of Amityville. Why don't we just start with Amityville? And it just kind of, happened from there. We just picked a topic and, we sat down and her and I developed questions, kind of like what we would like to ask one another. And then Bree steps in and Bree says, okay, well, let's do this, and this. And then we just go to town. Like we do heavy hitting research.
Right.
I both do. And we try not to cross contaminate, our research. And in the beginning, we were kind of gatekeeping a little bit. And then we had realized throughout the process of now doing this, we're like, well, there's some things we probably shouldn't gatekeep from one another.
Right.
So it has been an absolutely amazing experience to, one, receive the love that we have been receiving. Because I think when we first started this, Jess and I both sat there and said, and Bree, we were like, yeah, we might get like 10 people to listen. Maybe. We didn't have the expectation that we are currently receiving.
Right.
And that is just all the love and support from everyone is absolutely amazing. So that's something, wow.
Yeah, we had it when we started our stuff. We called it a hobby at first, and then it kind of turned into, I don't think this is really a hobby anymore. And we're like, we don't care if we get views. We don't care if people like us or whatever. And then you start seeing it, you're like, well, I kind of like that. Maybe we should do better.
Yeah, that was, Jess convinced me. I give her all the credit for this because originally I was like, oh, we got to pump out, episode here, episode there, do this, do that, blah, 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 blah. And Jess was like, I want to focus on quality over quantity.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, explain this to me. Let's focus on that. And that's the reason why we had decided to do one episode a month, because it gives Jess the time to really focus on the quality of what, because Jess is also our editor with stuff.
Right.
Like it's just the three of us. It is the three of us. Bree handles the social medias. I handle this type of stuff when it comes to like the interviews and the podcasting. and reaching out to people. I kind of like do the face-to-face type stuff. And then Jess will handle the editing. And then we all put our hands into the bucket for like the questions. We have meetings probably once a week, sometimes twice a week.
Wow.
To make sure that we're all
it
on
takes
that
a
same
lot
page.
of work to it takes a lot of work to put quality stuff out. I mean, I spend a lot of time. I'm all of that in one person. My husband does a lot, but I do probably 95% of everything. He just shows up. And he's good at all the technology stuff that I mess up all the time. But it takes a lot of work if you want to produce quality. And sometimes I wonder if people actually want that, because it seems like the not so quality stuff just takes off. And then, I think another podcast we did with Chaos Theory, he said people are like the car crash. It was a good analogy. People just want that car crash, but there is an audience for quality content. So it just takes time and patience.
I'm one of them. I love a good like production value. I became addicted to the No Sleep podcast, and I love those, I love everything about it. And they over the years, they really put in a production quality. And they're just telling you, scary stories essentially. But I remember like trying to, like, when I'm waiting for a new episode to come out, I'd be like, oh, well, let me find another podcast. And I found myself bored to tears when it was just like someone reading from a book, it felt like, in front of a fireplace, or whatever it was. I was like, I'm a production quality girl. Whoops. And that was just me. So I was like, I need that production.
So you guys also kind of had an investigating team to back some of this up, right? You didn't just, we talked a little bit about that. You didn't just step into doing the paranormal BS. You kind of had some history with investigating as well.
So I've been involved in the paranormal for myself, probably since I was in my teens. I grew up in Florida. I was close to St. Augustine, Florida. And if anyone's familiar with St. Augustine, it is one of the original colonies, one of the oldest cities in the United States. And there were tons of experiences happening back and forth. And so I just kind of, thought it was a really cool type thing to get into. My mother is very much into the paranormal, and she got me into it. My father was a very big skeptic. And but when I moved to the current state that I'm in, I originally started kind of my own thing. I was doing a thing on YouTube called The Fright Club, and where I was kind of like reviewing like horror movies and adding my funny personality SNL type sketches to it. And I said, I want to do an investigation. And there is a old school revival movie theater here in this town that I was very familiar with. And I was like, I want to add like an investigation to this element of the Fright Club. And so I became good friends with the general manager. Her name is Ariel. She's great. And then during COVID, they had hired me to work there. And then, unfortunately, COVID happened. We were all sitting around just kind of on our thumbs a little bit. And Ariel and I would meet up at theater at 10 o'clock at night and just be like, let's investigate the place, because it's such a beautiful history. And as employees, we had experiences. And then Ariel and I said, let's do tours, right? Let's see if we can really make some money for, because now that COVID was happening, we wanted to be COVID safe and COVID friendly. And there were no movies playing. So we were like, maybe we could still have a way to make money. And we started the Clifton 5 Ghost Tours. And then shortly after that, we became Clifton Paranormal. And Ariel and I and a couple other people, we were not only giving tours, but we were being invited to other locations to come and explore and make videos and do all this kind of stuff with it. So after that experience, and it was such a great run, I did that for 4 or 5 years. And if it wasn't for Clifton, I wouldn't be here right now. Because I learned so much working there and getting it, literally starting from the ground, not knowing what I was doing, and just kind of, you're either going to sink or swim.
Those are the fun ways to do that.
And they're scary.
Jump in.
It was a very scary.
Yeah.
And that is what when Jess and I started doing this, that's kind of really what it was. We knew when our time would be, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Like when we recorded some stuff like a year ago, we were like, it's not the time.
Right.
There's something, like I said, there's something missing from this element of what is going to make Full of Paranormal BS.
Right.
So that was the thing, was that I kind of went back to my time with Clifton and was like, what did I do there that I could bring here? Like what can we do and all of that. So it's been a whole like Pokemon evolution,
Yeah.
of just starting somewhere and then here we are now.
Yeah. So let's step back a little bit. So you said
Yeah.
your grandmother or your mother was into the paranormal.
My mother.
Okay. So did you, obviously you may have had some experiences when you were younger. Do you have your first experience that maybe made you a believer, or did it take a few times, or were you just influenced by your mother? And how does that relationship with you as far as the paranormal connects?
I would say that I was very exposed to those type of shows from way back in like the late 80s, the early 90s. We were like, in my household, we were big fans of the paranormal episodes of Unsolved Mysteries with Robert
Okay.
Stack.
Yeah.
And I found it fascinating. At that time, I hadn't really had any experiences, but also when you're that young, any experience you have, it's like you're a
Yeah.
kid,
Yeah.
And we would go to St. Augustine. Now I'm also a big advocate for that. In the paranormal world, your body is your biggest tool. Whether you believe in psychics, whether you believe in whatever your belief is, our bodies are always fine-tuned.
Right.
And if you understand what your body as a tool is trying to tell you, you might be able to go a little bit deeper into the world of paranormal. And I remember going to St. Augustine and being like, this area makes me feel off. It makes me feel weird.
Yeah.
So I would feel like those were paranormal experiences. The only issue with those type of experiences is that it's not, everyone has to trust you at your word.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And look, that's hard to do because it's not the first, even for myself. Like there are times where I gaslight myself to be like, wait, are you sure it wasn't a breeze from somewhere? So yeah, and then kind of still like growing up with that type of environment. That also in like the 90s, I would say the mid 90s is when they started releasing like fictional shows
Mhm.
of psychics. There was a show called The Others. Not the Nicole Kidman movie, but it was like
Right.
an NBC show. And I remember really enjoying that and thinking that, there is a world where this type of stuff exists. And then of course we had our reign of like Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters and
Yeah.
all these shows. But I personally was not a big fan of those particular shows. And that was
Mhm.
just because I didn't feel, I wasn't seeing what they were seeing.
Yeah.
Right. It was more of an experience type
Yeah.
thing. And I wasn't there to experience it.
Yeah.
But I was a big fan of like reenactments.
Yeah.
There's something about a reenactment that makes me believe it more.
Yeah.
Oddly enough.
Yeah.
And that's carried on. I mean, like even the house that I'm in now, like this was my grandmother's house. Like I moved here about 11 years ago to take care of her in her older age. We lost her last year.
Okay.
And but there have been tons of experiences in this house that I sit there and I go, it's not me, right?
Yeah.
I know, and then also to hear my generationally is very fascinating when it comes to a house, because like for example, I had experiences in this house when I was a kid visiting that, like I said, as a kid, you don't really think too much
Yeah.
about it, but I would bring it up in my adult years to my mom, and my mom would be like, that happened to me when I was a kid
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
this house.
Yeah.
And I'm
And
like,
having hindsight now, looking back, you
oh,
can say, oh yeah, those were kind of weird. I had a lot of stuff
yeah.
happen to me. I'm an empath. So yeah, I've had a lot of weird experiences at the time. It was like, oh, I'm just weird. And I can look
Yeah.
back on it and go, yeah, that was something. So you can't,
Yeah, even from a scientific point of view, like our, I call them goosies or goose pimples, right? Like,
Mhm.
when there is it has to do with the the electromagnetic frequency, like when it's disturbed or anything such as that, like your body will have a reaction to it. Those are called goosebumps.
Yeah.
And that is something that's either, caused by something, what I like to say, like the ether, like there's something there that is disrupting your own biochemical energy.
Yeah. Yeah. And Ryan would have a lot to say.
That.
He's more the medical the genius more than I am. I mean, I do stuff, but he is a walking medical dictionary. He can give you all kinds of analogies on that stuff.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
We call that flight or fight, most of the time. So, so as far as your co-host, Jess, what makes her, she's just a complete non-believer, or does she just like to play the part of the non-believer, or has she had experiences, but...
So Jess wants to believe so bad. She really does. She has a beautiful mind to want to believe, but unfortunately science backs up the disbelief more than the belief. Yeah. And that's really what she hits me with. I mean, there are times doing this show to where I am just flabbergasted to sit there and go, wow, she might be right. We just did Waverly, and in Waverly there is the cook who sometimes makes an appearance by the smell of bread. And so she hit me with the idea, like, so you look at Waverly, look, it is decrepit, it is ancient, it is this, it is falling apart. And she hit me with a list of molds or fungus that grow. And there are some that smell like baking bread.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was like, who are we to say that this mold, like this environment isn't the right type of environment for this type of mold that sometimes smells like bread when it spores out.
Right.
That is what people aren't smelling. And I went, holy crap.
Yeah. That would be a valid analogy.
Yeah. She hits you with these little seeds of doubt. That do grow. Like they grow during the show, during recording. Cause I'm just kind of like, I was very convinced that there's a dead baker, in Waverly. Yeah. And now I'm not so sure.
Yeah. And to be a good investigator, you have to have you have to be able to debunk things. You have to be okay with going, well, I was wrong. But, you do have to dig into those things, I guess that would be really deep diving into your investigation. Yeah. I don't know if I want to run around and do mold testing, but I mean, you could. I mean, maybe we should be doing that. But it would rule out a lot of stuff. I haven't personally experienced smells so much. I have kids, so I get to have enough smells in my house. But I haven't experienced any of that type of stuff. Mine's more feelings. I've been touched. I've seen things. So, but I haven't been down that road.
And there's tons of stuff. I mean, like I said, she wants to believe, and she had even told me, that there's like some things that I've kind of handed to her that she's like, well, I can't explain that. I don't know what that is. And, a lot of the times there are things, it's not only, I guess, so we, like, for example, our first episode, Amityville, there were a lot of things that were happening in that house that the couple had spoken about. And even the kids have come out and said, yes, this really happened. But it was also the late 60s, early 70s where psychedelics were huge.
Yeah.
And, not to say that, parents, because they weren't his children, they were her kids, but not to say that, I mean, what kind of responsible parents going around doing psychedelics with their kids in the house? But look, my parents would totally smoke pot in the basement when I was a kid, because I would come home from school and be like, where are you guys? And they're down in the basement. So it's like, it's not unheard of.
Yeah.
And then of course there was the whole like lawsuit, with them. There was legal matter that had to deal with the idea of that this whole thing was a hoax.
Yeah.
And you can't deny that, that is out there on paper. So like, these are the types of things that she hits me with, that she deep dives. And I find it fascinating, because as a paranormal believer and an enthusiast, I still have a side to rep for. And I want people to sit there and say, hey, look, this could also, like, I remember we got into it during our Cecil, which was our second episode, because they asked me, do I believe Elisa Lam was the paranormal aspect? And I said, no.
Yeah.
And I remember they stopped the recording and they said, whoa, no. And like Bree stopped in and she was like, Colin, no, you've got to rep a side here. I said, yeah, but I'm not going to lie to people.
Yeah.
I think there is too much evidence to suggest that, unfortunately, Elisa Lam was troubled and what had happened, obviously. So, but I ended up going back there and doing a little bit more research and finding some things that were odd. They were very odd. And so I came back with that, and that's when they were like, okay, yeah, no, that's actually pretty cool that you found that stuff, and hit us back with that. And so those are kind of the things that we'll go through.
Yeah. I think
but
when it comes to those extreme paranormal, I say that with quotes, because when you have extreme cases like that, like the Amityville and and all the other ones that are like that have murder in them, where they're offing people and killing them, and you have to take into the account the mental health side of it, all of that, because could you get an attachment or be influenced by not so good things? Absolutely, you can. That would cause you to do those things, sure. But yeah, you would really have to deep dive and really get into that and see all aspects of it. For me, it would be hard to believe that, yes, this was all just paranormal. Well, depending on what your theory of paranormal is. That kind of gets into the biblical side of it and what the human side of paranormal is. So,
And that was the one thing that we definitely discussed a lot on Cecil, because there were so many suicides in that building alone that I even had to sit there and say, look, I think that there is something potentially influencing people.
Right.
I do think that there are numerous cases out there in the world where someone has been influenced by something.
Right.
And it's obviously an outside entity.
Right.
So yeah, I feel that those type of things do exist. And, like you said, it's like, you gotta be wary of that type of thing. And I know, like, when people ask me, like, my beliefs, I'm also one of those, like, believe what I see type people. I know that earlier you were talking about Bigfoot and stuff and cryptids, and I'm not sure if I'm a believer or not, because I feel like I need to see it.
Yeah.
I want to see it. And that's one thing that I have to go for, especially when it comes to the idea of cryptids. And I also go back and I'm like, if we look at the theory of dinosaurs, there obviously something has existed. I have the Italian hand. Things bigger than us have existed before. So is it crazy to think that cryptids exist now? And I don't think it's crazy, but at the same time, I'm like, I feel like I need to see it in order to really
we've gone down a rabbit hole with that too. And we're actually, that's another podcast we're working on right now. We're kind of trying to take our time with it, because it sits so much on the biblical side, and we don't want to become a biblical channel. Not that I wouldn't do that, because I believe in the Bible. I believe in the book of Revelations and all that, but we did go down a rabbit hole, and we're working on that right now. And we have a lot of interesting things, because we believe it's all connected. Paranormal, cryptids, whatever. It's all connected. Have I seen Bigfoot? No. Now, Ryan says he heard Bigfoot. We were camping out about an hour from here in the mountains, and he said it was an indescribable scream. And we're pretty versed in where we live and sounds and the different animals here. We don't do a whole lot of out in the middle of nowhere investigations yet, because we have so many bears and bobcats here that it's just kind of scary. Sometimes you feel like you're being tracked, and you're like, I just want to go home now. So, but I think there is some connection to all of that. And that'll be an interesting podcast. So
I was doing an investigation at the cabin on 360 in Virginia, and I heard foxes for the first time, and I almost peed myself because I was convinced it was paranormal. And I was, because I'm not a wilderness person. It's never been I heard bullfrogs. Like, I've heard a bullfrog, but I've never heard a chorus of bullfrogs. And I was like, it sounded like chanting. And I was like, there's something in the woods, and they're chanting. And then, like, my friend who's like, he's a fisherman, and he was like, that's literally a chorus of bullfrogs. And I'm like, oh, okay, never mind.
It's funny that you say that, because we were at a cemetery about 20 minutes out of where we live right now. And it's where all the settlers were buried that came here. And there was a lot of children there, a lot of unmarked graves, but there was a lot of children, because back then in the 1800s, it was almost like whole families. And a lot of them were like babies and kids. And it was kind of heartbreaking, but it was getting just kind of dusk, and we kept hearing this kid crying. We're like, what is that? It sounds like a couple of kids. We thought they were crying. So we're like looking all over this field. And then we realized it was a family of whatever we were talking about.
Oh, foxes?
Foxes, yes. It was foxes. And that's how they yelped. They were yelping. And I think the babies were
Oh.
yelping for their moms because it was a mom and dad and some babies. And that's
Mm.
what it was. But for the longest time, we were like, freaking out because we kept thinking we were hearing kids crying. It was pretty funny.
Yeah.
So thank God we got them on film because we would have never figured it out. And we probably would have went, yeah, that was paranormal.
Yeah, I love it when we debunk ourselves. I think
Yeah.
that is something. I think in the moment, like I was saying with you earlier, like I had done the old hospital in College Hill, and there was a moment during that investigation because there's on the second floor there's like a headquarters, like this kind of safe room, and I remember I'd gone up there to change batteries, and then I closed the door and walked out and then went downstairs and meet the two guys that I was with. And then another guy had to go up and he radioed me. He was like, Colin, did you shut the door to the safe room? I said, yes. And he was like, well, it's wide open. I said, oh, paranormal. And then I went back and looked at my camera. I did not shut that door.
Yeah.
I was convinced that I did,
Yeah.
but I did not. Nope.
Yeah.
And it's completely debunked.
Yeah. It's fun to do that. So let's talk a little bit about some of your investigations because I did watch your whole one on Waverly. That was a long one.
Yes.
There's a lot in that I wanted to pull out, but
Yeah.
And then you guys did the Queen Mary down in San Diego. So I'm not real versed in the Queen Mary. My husband is because he lived down that way when he was younger. He's been on all of that down there. So I guess the story is they are a British boat, and they were in the wartime back then. Were transporting a lot of people. Not only were they transporting regular people, but they were also transporting not so much injured soldiers, but they were there. So and then they ended up hitting a boat and then just took off. So that's kind of the story I got out of that. Does that sound about right?
So with the Queen Mary, the most important thing to take away from the Queen Mary is that without the Queen Mary, we would not have survived World War II. We would probably be in a third or fourth rake right now.
Yeah.
Without the Queen Mary. The Queen Mary ended up transporting so many people through the World War II that Hitler put a hit out on the Queen Mary.
Okay.
Because he knew how dangerous transporting all these troops actually was.
Mhm.
And there was a moment during wartime, they had two ships flanking them in the ocean. And unfortunately, there was the HMS Curacao that no one's really sure why 100%, but it ended up flanking too close and they ended up cutting it in half, kind of ran them over. And unfortunately, during the war, like the maritime laws and with wartime, they were not allowed to stop and pick up the men.
I did read that they were afraid of the submarines because there were a lot of submarines in play at that time.
Yeah.
I do remember that.
And the captain like radioed over and said, hey, look, like we need to stop. Like we just hit this boat. And they were like, no, you can't. Like you could be literally dead in the water. Like you could get hit. And so there, if I remember correctly, there were a couple of survivors from that, but I mean, literally a majority were lost in the HMS Curacao accident. But there were also other countless boats that were sank by German enforcers, because what ended up happening was that the German enforcers would find out where the Queen Mary was supposed to go and where it was supposed to dock at. And I guess the Queen Mary ended up, luckily, finding out the information that the Germans had, and they changed course.
Right.
And so then the Germans would go and sink a boat that was in the dock, and they would think, oh, we got it. And they did it. It was unfortunately a completely different boat. But it was so important. And then it docked, I believe, in 1967 along those lines.
Yeah. Yep.
And it kind of, obviously it's such a huge deal, and they kind of made it into a museum of sorts. And then it was kind of like a floating hotel, and that's kind of what it is today.
Yeah.
But the thing about that particular episode that really impressed me, especially from the skeptic side of view, on Jess's point of view there, was that, Disney was trying to turn it into a haunted attraction of sorts.
Right.
And they had added there's like a stateroom B340 that has this whole lore, and there are so many different documentations of what actually happened in that room. And then it just kind of became rumor mill. And then we found out that when Disney was trying to make it into a haunted attraction, they actually took apart stateroom B340 and added a whole bunch of creepy elements to the room.
Right.
And then of course US Ghost Adventures did their thing. And I was actually telling Jess this the other day, because like she really hit hard on US Ghost Adventures. Like she cannot stand them.
Yeah,
Um,
I've just recently had read some stuff about that
yeah,
organization. That was kind of like, I didn't know they even existed, but then I went and kind of researched it a little bit. So yeah, it's kind of a bummer,
it
if
is.
if
And
that's truly the case. I have nothing to say to
yeah,
it, but if that's the
yeah.
case, it's kind of a bummer.
Well, she had found out all this information, kind of like what they were doing. And like honestly, it's like the intent can be different than what they're actually putting out there. And I
Right.
think that was the one thing that I was trying to debate with her. But then we found out US Ghost Adventures had a hand a little bit in the Lizzie Borden house. And
Yeah. Yeah.
they also have I was telling Jess, I said, Jess, it's so funny to me because on Facebook right now, my Facebook in the paranormal community is blowing up because US Ghost Adventures is trying to buy another location and the paranormal community is pissed.
Yeah, I
They
think they
don't
bought
want
2 or 3
anything.
locations if what I was
Yes.
reading was correct. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know, when you're not your heart's not 100% into. I think most of paranormal people want to know where we go after this. It's certainly
Yeah.
that's where it is with us, and that's where it sits. It's not necessarily that we wanna go out and capture a bunch of ghosts on film. Ghost is kind of a Hollywood term, but, yeah, it's kinda disheartening when you're very into what you do and you believe it, and you
Yeah.
want to share your knowledge, and then something like that comes along, and then money talks.
Yeah, it just feels like US Ghost Adventures is really for the attraction.
Yeah.
And the idea of turning some of these locations into literally tourist attractions, and then you're selling t-shirts based off of
Yeah.
like John Petter. There should not be a t-shirt of who they call Half Hitch Harry there. Like
Yeah.
that was a real person who unfortunately died on the Queen Mary. And it was like, okay, so now you're profiting off of literally this 18, 19-year-old kid's death.
Right.
So those are the things that, and I agree with Jess, like we both find very distasteful.
Yeah.
And those are things that we have discovered within doing this podcast. Because look, guys, like my Facebook was blowing up with stuff like US Ghost Adventures prior to doing all of
Yeah.
this, because they're one of the #1 tourist sites in the world, and you think
Right.
to yourself that you're going to get some really good quality over what they can put out there.
Right.
But now I'm realizing, unfortunately, it's not that.
So outside of that, let's talk about like the stories of the Queen Mary, because that we've
Yeah.
always wanted to go down there, and then when you guys were kind of bantering about it, and I'm like, well, okay, so the little girl story, the drowning, yeah,
Jackie.
that's an undocumented thing. The death, I don't know if that was a 19-year-old you were talking about, but he was the sailor that got pinned into the doors and stuff like that.
Yes.
That's a real story. But I
is.
kind of, you guys were talking about I think the lady in the white gown. I think I've heard that quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's almost a common
Yep.
apparition that people see. We've seen it in my house, but that's a long story. My house is very active, but I want to go back to the crash itself. I think you guys were talking about, why is the ship this specific? Why would it be haunted by these people that lost their life on a completely different ship?
Yeah.
And there's a few theories to that. But my thing, I wanted to go a little bit farther, because where I live in California, most of the places that we could go that are popular, that we could go actually pay to take a tour, it's kind of like that. It's about money and not the history so much anymore. That's how it feels to me. Is it that way? I don't know. But we live on a lot of Native American land. So in our area, I feel like the paranormal that people experience that's real and not, I just think I saw a ghost walking down the road. There's a lot of spiritual energy here where we live.
Yeah.
And we sit really on that, the energy that's left over. So in your mind, as far as the collision, how electricity transfers and stuff like that, would you think that maybe some of that other dimensional energy during death could transfer to a different space and stay there because maybe it looked safer, or that's just the way it transferred? Like if I go stick my finger in a light socket, it didn't have anywhere to go before, but if I go stick my finger in it, it's going to transfer through me, and that would be a bad day. But do you think maybe some of that energy may have transferred a little bit?
Oh, 100%. I think when you have large catastrophic tragedies such as that. There was a gentleman who was working on board the ship. He has been since the day that they opened. I believe it docked in 1967,
Mhm.
and they kind of started the tours, and making a museum in the early 70s. He was the main guy who was there every morning. He did everything as far as like cleaning up and checking everything.
Mhm.
He had this great story of being down in the engine room, and he heard and felt something hit the ship. He heard water. He heard people screaming.
Mhm.
And obviously he went running to, there's nothing there. And that whole thing, like he thought to himself that it was a curacao. And I feel like that was just the energy, I
Right.
think that energy itself in that moment happens.
Yeah.
And I think it's literally left its imprint. The Queen Mary is one of those fascinating locations to where I feel that you get residual haunting, and then
Yeah.
you get the imprint of things that have happened.
And I think that's what we might call a looping. I'm kind of pretty new to those
Yeah.
terms the last couple of years, but it's kind of like the Civil War area when people go and they investigate those old war grounds and they get that same apparition every single time. It's kind of like a looping and it just replays and replays. So I think that's part of maybe what people are missing on the Queen Mary because they get so laser focused on these other stories. And also, I think there's also a German submarine park behind the Queen Mary. Now, my husband knew more about that
Oh,
than I do, so he's not
okay.
here to speak to that, unfortunately. But I'm all wonder there were so many people transported in that 30 years on that ship. Soldiers could have passed away.
Yeah.
Other people had passed away. Was the documentation good there, according to what you look up online? I've not been nowhere to make that a fact, but you have to take that into account. Back then, records were
Yeah.
all handwritten. So could some of these things have been lost? Could a little girl have died on that ship in the pool? Maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I
Well, and
think,
there was, especially when it comes to that type of stuff, like I know so like the pool area itself at one point was containment for POWs, like German POWs.
okay.
And there was, I believe there were about 30 to 40 POWs who died in
Wow.
the area due to like heat stroke.
Right.
Because it was so hot, and like their energy is still felt there
Yeah.
today. Like people have captured beautiful, but like EVPs of like let me out, it's hot, like
Right.
all this type of stuff, and like people feel very like weird in that area. The theory to me that I really love about Jackie, the spirit, is that I believe Nicole Strickland, whose book that I was reading for my research, had stated that she felt this Jackie spirit is just a manifestation of the ship itself. The ship has seen
Right.
so much history. It has
Right.
seen so many people that all of that energy that is manifested has finally kind of taken into its own form. And it
Right.
is kind of this unofficial spokesperson of the ship itself. And I thought that was really beautiful because
Yeah.
I guess I never thought about, locations or something like that. Because normally when we go into a place that's, like a haunted house, or
Right.
we look at the land, we look at all the stuff that was on the house previous. But the Queen Mary, it was literally a vessel that sailed the seas. It went to so many different locations.
Right.
So we can't look at the land that it
Yeah.
came from.
Right.
And then there are also a lot of people died of an unfortunately just regular sickness and bad
Right.
health,
Yeah.
aboard the ship in the medical wing that is there.
Yeah,
There
because
were numerous
they weren't
reports.
really meant to be, if I read it right, they weren't meant to really be a medical facility. But when you're transporting that many people, you end up being a
Yeah.
medical
Oh
facility
yeah.
without the
Yeah.
proper tools.
And just because we also like we try to look at people who have investigated the Queen Mary, like their YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And, we'll look into those as far as our research concerned. And like the really cool thing was that I believe it was the Ghost Hunters. They did an episode aboard the Queen Mary, and they found in the stateroom in the stateroom, I can't remember, it's like 502, 5302. The one that has like the biggest haunted reputation because of there was a man who allegedly murdered
Mhm.
his children in there and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
The people working there had stated to the ghost hunters that they're the they would go in there and make up the beds, and then they would go back minutes later and the beds are
Mhm.
disheveled and all that kind of stuff. So they had set up a camera in that room. They caught footage of the bed being pulled down.
Right.
And then going over the footage, they realized there was a skip. And it was literally someone, because there's also like we found out that in the Queen Mary, there are kind of these little like alcoves that you could get into and out of. And there was like this hallway. It was probably, I would say, maybe about 4 or 5 feet wide that was attached. And someone came in through that and paused the video camera and started to pull down thing and then unpause it to make it look like it was, and they debunked it. And they actually put that out there and said, look, unfortunately, this place is great, but we're showing, deceiving. This is what we're coming up with right now. And it's hard to really proceed with the rest of this investigation with an open mind because we know we've been deceived right here.
Right. Yeah.
And I found that really fascinating.
And that was Ghost Hunters that did that. I'm trying to remember who. I know who they are, but I don't watch a lot of the shows. I haven't for a while. So
yeah, that's like Steve and Tango and
I think I get them a little confused with Taps and stuff like that. So
that is Taps. Yeah. Okay. Ghost Adventures is Zach Biagins.
Yeah.
And that's the other one. That he's a very controversial character in the world of paranormal.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer because these for me it's just disappointing because these guys have all brought a lot to the table, but unfortunately when you tip over into the entertainment side of it, which is hard not to do that because you want to keep yourself relevant in the paranormal world. And we've talked to other people about this, other groups when we've done podcasting, but once you get into contracts with Discovery or Travel Channel or whatever the case may be, now you're beholden to those contracts and it's like kind of being a politician. You got to sell your soul a little bit to stay relevant. Can you fault them for it? Not really. When you want to put money in your pocket, it just depends on how much money you want to put in your pocket. But
even with that, I felt like there was a genuineness. Like the Ghost Brothers, right? I met them. They're wonderful guys. Yeah. They are so like on their show, they are so genuine. And you can tell that it's not necessarily for the money, but they're like, look, we're not going to put out cheap effects. We're not going to yell at the camera. We're not going to do any of this. We're going to put out what we truly believe, what we experienced, what we felt. That's it.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of respect. I still do. I met them. They're great guys.
Mm-hmm.
They're super nice. And I want to say, when you get into the world of like Ghost Adventures, it's a lot to once again, it's a rabbit hole that you go
it's a lot that
we go down.
Yeah.
And I feel that you are correct. I do think there are people who kind of get their hands in many different pies.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great money that comes out of that. And unfortunately, that is how the world goes around,
And then the world isn't always honest. You get your viewers that they want all that. They're not really interested. Like I said, I spend hours, and we were just talking about this morning about, I want to make these quality videos and I'm self-taught. So I'm sure anybody that was professional will go, yeah, she's a greenhorn, but I don't care because I put a lot of time into what I do.
Yeah.
And then to barely have anybody watch it is fine because that wasn't our goal. Somebody will watch it someday. And if it helps one person and the story hits home, or maybe people from that area watch it and they're like, oh, that was really cool, then that makes me feel okay. But we kind of live in this world, like I said, Chaos Theory said, they like the car crash, they don't care about the truth. But that's not everybody. We all have an audience, and that's awesome. So I'm not going to fault anybody.
And that's definitely like what we try to like Jess and I really focus on truth and integrity, especially when it comes to that research. Like Jess and I will have full on 3-hour meetings of going, okay, well, this is some research that I found, but you found something that's conflicting. We want to make sure the truth gets out there to the best of our ability. We don't want to use these kind of made up, for example, we were talking in the Waverly episode, the ghost of Timmy, how ghosts, I believe it was US Ghost Adventures, had named him Timmy O'Shea. And it was like, you just randomly threw a name on there. There's literally no, just like research hard. There was no books, no label, anything about a Timmy O'Shea. Because I also explained, I said, the idea of especially children in a tuberculosis hospital, we know there were children deaths. It could have easily been someone, when it comes to the myth of Timmy, it could have easily been someone, an investigator who felt that this was a male spirit and he named him Timmy, and it just
Right.
kind of it caught on. But you don't know if you're talking to Charlotte, you don't know if you're talking to
Right.
a Jane or whatever it is. But for a company to tack on now a last name, because that makes it more believable.
Yeah.
And that is where Jess and I kind of go, okay, like there should be tact involved in little things like this.
Yeah.
And that's what really, as a skeptic, that's what really kind of like really garners that skepticism into her brain, because it's like,
Right.
you
Yeah.
guys have no respect for these ghosts that you're trying to say exist.
Yeah.
And that's, I give her a lot of credit for that, because I sit there and I go, yeah, you know, unfortunately, sometimes paranormal investigating is a lot like going to a zoo,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
we kind of perform, you know,
Yeah.
dance on the ball, and there are times where you don't realize, you know, look, these were people.
Yeah.
Technically, they still are in my mind.
Yeah.
You know, I still feel they're people. So yeah, you know,
Yeah,
you
we
just gotta have
did
the
an
truth.
investigation on the VFW locally. I haven't well, actually that one was the American Legion. I haven't dropped the VFW. My mom worked there, so that's kind of personal for me. But we did the American Legion, and we had asked some questions in that, and as I'm editing, I'm putting all this in, and then I had to go back and go, you know, that's kind of a sensitive material. So I had to dumb it way down so it wouldn't be triggering for veterans, because I thought, well, that might be a little too much. You know, we want to be honest, but sometimes you can be a little too honest. So, you know, you have to take care of in how you present stuff, because we truly care about our veterans. And, you know, we had to really kind of rethink that whole thing. So it took me double the time to do that video, because I had to go back and reevaluate how much and how we wanted to describe things, because you want people to understand the severity of those kinds of wars. But then you can share a little too much, or like people want to make up stuff to make it more relatable. That's why they want to make it relatable. Oh, I can relate. I'm Irish or whatever. You know, it's like, oh, I can relate.
I'm even like, I'm going through that. Well, I like, so as a man in the paranormal community, so we were speaking with a group called Chasing Midnight about their experience at Waverly. And there were a couple of stories about the nurse who had hung herself, and allegedly one of the issues might have been that she was pregnant. Well, you know, there was also the story that an unfortunate undeveloped, I'm trying to word this as nicely as possible, so an underdeveloped child was found in the sewer because it had been flushed down the toilet. And I was like, now, because it was said on Ghost Adventures by the woman who owned it, and then it was said somewhere else, and I was like, but I'm not finding this information anywhere that was actually listed. So I just plainly asked Chasing Midnight, are they telling you this when they give you a tour? Because I want to know, is it part of the tour experience? Are they giving you this information? And they, you know, Isabel answered, and she laughed, and she's like, no, I didn't hear any of that. Well, later on, Bree, our producer, you know, she's a mother. She was like, hey, Colin, I just want to say, you know, because you're a man, that might have been a sensitive topic for a woman, because you don't know what they've been through. And I said, oh, I didn't. Wasn't even something that crossed my brain at all.
Yeah.
So like, I'm learning to kind of sit there and say, okay, what, you know, so she was like, if you could just maybe, you know, bring that up in kind of like a better way, as opposed to kind of throwing it out there and seeing if anyone's going to catch it, that would, you know, be a little bit more respectful. And I was like, I didn't even think about that, because I'm a guy.
Yeah, and I've had a little bit of experience with that, and we don't talk about this a whole lot, not because we're ashamed. I mean, I'm a big Ghost Adventures fan. That's kind of how we all started. My oldest daughter that we lost actually got me watching that show, and like I said, I think we just started watching before COVID hit, and then you watched every episode of everything. So that's kind of what got me interested in this in this stuff. But like I said, we have a very active house, and they came and investigated our house, and my daughter suffered from mental health issues, but before she lost her life, she had been living with her boyfriend and their friends, and they were kind of doing some not so great stuff. She wasn't a devil worshiper, by no means was she, but she was autistic, and she was kind of the person that would kind of go along for the laugh, you know, oh, that's funny, you know, but she was never a devil worshiper. So when they told that part of the story, they twisted it a little bit. And had you not been paying attention to the beginning of their intro, you would probably think she was a devil worshiper. and I was a little bent by that, but all in all, the experience was really good and we got what we wanted out of it. We didn't do it to be on TV. We wanted answers because this was in the inception of us getting into the paranormal, and we had a ton of experiences in our own house. And that's all on our YouTube channel. But yeah, it was that, like, and I think that's why we're sensitive to that. And we just look into that a whole lot because we know how it felt to have your story just twisted a little bit, that if you really didn't pay attention to the story, you would have think something totally different. But like I said, all in all, they do have a human side, believe it or not. And so does Zach. Yeah. But that was our experience. I can't speak to other people, but we got what we wanted.
I was told by a friend of mine who has worked with Zach before. She's met him, talked to him over the phone, that in real life, he's a sweetheart. He's kind of a teddy bear, right? Yeah. But on camera, he gives this gruff.
He's a beast
persona.
Yeah.
You know, it's a character that he has kind of developed against the haters and all that.
Yeah.
You know, but it's kind of like, if you remember, oh gosh, what was his name? I don't remember his name, but he was the guy who did infomercials and would yell at you the entire time.
Yeah.
And there was an interview with him on 60 Minutes, and they sat there and said, "Why do you scream during this infomercial?" And he says, "Could I have your pen?" And they were like, "Sure." And he goes, "Do you want to buy this pen?" And like, he was like, "If I just sit there and talk about how great this pen feels in my hand, everyone's like, sure. But if I'm screaming at you, I'm getting your attention, and now you're paying attention to me." And that's what kind of Zach Baggins reminded me of. I was like, look, at the end of the day, as controversial as he may be, he gets your attention.
Yeah, he's a good storyteller.
He's a great storyteller. And it's like, when you're in the world of, especially, you know, back in the early 2000s, when the kind of ghost on television was really booming, it was a really hard market to get yourself into, in a sense. And so he was doing stuff that put him at the top. And that was, you know, like I said, I don't know him personally. I would love to know him personally. But I think the biggest issue, like, out of the ghost adventures that we have watched, I know Jess's biggest issue, because she does video editing, is that she notices these cuts and these edits that she's like, why did they do it like that? Because it looks a little shady. And like, I did explain, I said, look, in the world of ghost hunting, right, you might get a hit and you're really excited about it. You know, whether it's a hit on a REM pod or you get an EVP and you're like, yes, it's something. And then you get nothing for 7 hours.
Yeah.
And they're going to cut that, right? They're going to edit it to make it look like you got it back to back to back.
Yeah.
But Jess made a good point. You know, she sat there and said, why couldn't they say that? Why couldn't they put something on the television screen to say, hey, look, we sat in this room for 2 hours after this hit, nothing. But
yeah, that's a good point, because I cut a lot of stuff out. I'm not, you know, you got to put your little episode into 1 hour to share. Not only for us, we want to share the history, but if we did everything we ever did, we'd probably be sitting here watching a video for 2 days.
Yeah.
But we don't do that either. So I've never really thought about that, but it would be a good point for people that are non-believers, because they don't understand that, yes, we have to crunch this down to a certain amount of time or people are just going to lose interest. You know, it's hard to, I mean, your guys' podcasts are, you know, they're long, they're interesting. I had fun listening to them, but I could see where sometimes you might need to gate that down a little bit, but you don't want to. I want to show you all of it. But yeah, that's just kind of that's the double-edged sword of doing this kind of work. You got to cut it off somewhere, you know, and sometimes that can make it look fake.
Yeah, Waverly was like our longest to date. And like, I have my reservations about it. We've talked about it. It's, you know, but also I'm the type of person, like the stuff that I listen to is an hour, maybe a little bit longer. And that's really about it, because I know my attention span. I have an addictive personality, and I will, you know, kind of go back and forth with things. But, you know, speaking with other fans who are other people who are fans of the podcast, not just ours, but other ones, a lot of people, honestly, it was like a poll, like a majority of people said, no, we like the longer stuff. And I was like, really?
Yeah. And I hear that too. It's just like, but there's an audience for everybody. Like I said, you can't base what you want to do off how many thumbs up you're going to get, or you're just going to lose the motivation to keep going forward. So
yeah. And that's what I said. I you know,
I get excited, but I have to ignore it a little bit. Otherwise I'd be like all bummed out.
We just have to look at performance reviews. You know, I mean, that's something that, you know, with the system that we use, it gives us like how many streams you got that day versus 2 days and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, you know, like this gives us an idea of what's performing well, what's not performing well. And, the one thing that Jess and Bree and I always do is that we kind of have this, it's what I call a come to Jesus meeting, to where we go, okay, here's some good pros, here's some cons. And then we apply that to the next episode.
Right.
Because we're like, we all want to be satisfied in all of this. But we obviously, we have to think about our audience.
Right.
And so here's some pros, here's some cons, and let's go on from there. Like Bree is such a great like mediator in all of this.
Yeah.
Because Bree sits on that fine line of skepticism and believer. She's a little bit more of a believer than she is a skeptic, but she'll sit there and be like, yeah, like this it doesn't sound right. Like, I don't think this existed or this happened.
Yeah.
And so she really kind of helps Jess and I mediate with that. And she's such a great producer.
Yeah. I think to be 100% believer, and I'm going to go out on a limb and probably speak to 4 people. I'm not speaking for them, but if I had to make a good guesstimation, if you're going to be a true believer, ghost is kind of a Hollywood word to me. Anything could be a ghost. I think most of the places we go to, I like to call them spirit filled, but you have to kind of look outside the normal box that we're in of what a ghost or paranormal is. And that becomes biblical. You have to think of dimensions, inner dimensions, wherever I think we come from a lot of different dimensions.
Yeah.
Heaven could be 4 different places. And I think in order to become a believer in the real spiritual world, not what we think is Hollywood. And I think a lot of people look at us as being just Hollywood and just want attention and make stuff up. I think you have to expand your mind and read some of the past stories of where we originally came from. And then you'd maybe understand where some people are coming from. We're a good majority of people that are in this for real, that want the
that
truth.
Was we sort of kind of touch a little bit of based on that when we did the Lizzie Borden house, because my thing is that when it comes to the Lizzie Borden house, why would Lizzie want to come back and haunt the home that she allegedly murdered her dad and stepmother in? Why would that be your choice? Right.
Yeah.
And then Jess's counter to that was that because US Ghost Adventures needs Lizzie Borden to be there.
Yeah.
In order to sell tickets. And I was like, good point. But at the same time, it's kind of like, I feel that when it comes to this idea of residual hauntings or intelligent hauntings, we as energy create ripples every day.
Yeah.
But also as an intelligent haunting, it's kind of like, religion plays a big factor into what we come out with when it comes to an intelligent haunting, especially when you look at the 1800s, early 1900s, when you talk about Catholicism and Puritanism, how unfortunately religion was used as a tool for fear than it was for anything else. And there are spirits who I feel are afraid to move on because of their fear that they might not go to a higher place.
Yeah. And we have a whole theory on that. That's going to be in that podcast that's coming up. So hopefully you guys will catch it.
I'll listen. Yeah,
you'll know what it is when we start dropping promos for it. So I don't want to give too much away because we were kind of scared to do it because we didn't want to get too biblical. Not the fact that we don't believe in that, but we try to be respectful of everybody's beliefs. And that's kind of a door we don't want to open for arguments. And it's not going to be an argument. It's just going to be a discussion and what we learned about. And I think it's a fun topic. So, and it, like I said, it kind of connects a lot of things for us. And we're not going to be saying we're right. This is just a theory. So, but it's a fun theory. But yeah, so I forgot what my point was to all that, but there was a point. Somebody got the point. I don't know who. But yeah, I don't think people want to necessarily stay here and haunt people because they want to kill more people or they're pissed off that they just killed their parents.
Yeah.
I think it's bigger than that.
Especially when we get into these like larger locations, like, I had brought this up on Waverly when they talked about the creeper and like what it could be and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I'm a firm believer in the idea of a tulpa. And this, I read this really great study. There was a study that was done. Are you familiar with Sylvia Brown?
Not really.
Okay. So Sylvia Brown
familiar. Who is she?
She was the psychic on the Montel Jordan show with the long nails and she had the red hair.
Yeah.
She wrote, so I have a soft spot for Sylvia Brown. I know a lot of people make fun of her, but I had one of my uncles passed away under mysterious circumstances. And my mother ended up, because my grandmother at that time, that was her son. She was very hurt, very confused. She didn't know what was happening. And so they spoke with Sylvia Brown, like she had a service that you would call. And the whole point of it, or not the whole point, but what she would do is that she would, she'd be the only one on the phone. And then she would say, also, my son, who is recording the conversation, is on the phone as well, but he will not speak. I will speak to the person, which was my grandmother at the time, but you're allowed to have another person on the call as well, but they cannot speak. And those were the rules. So 4 people were allowed. And then they send you the tape. And I remember listening to it. And what I thought was strange on this tape was that every single time they brought up my uncle who had passed away under mysterious circumstances, I could hear a male breathing. And I was like, could it have been the son? Absolutely. But why did you pick now to kind of like deep breathe into the phone? And then also she spoke about my mother had injured vertebrae years and years ago. And Sylvia brought this up. It's not like that was on public record somewhere.
Right.
And so there were things that Sylvia came with that I was like, okay, so I have a soft spot. And she worked with a lady who worked at this college, and it was a college there in California. And the lady wrote into her and said, I discovered this idea of tulpa. And the lady pictured a monk in her mind's eye, and she meditated on it every morning before she went to go teach classes. It was like Berkeley. And she would sit there and meditate on it. For years, she meditated on this image of a monk until the point that she started to see the monk. Anytime that she called to him in her mind, like she could see him. She was the only one who could see him. Right. But then over the years, she had realized that this monk was kind of being seen by her when she wasn't thinking about him, it took on a life of its own. And then there were people in the school who had reported seeing a man dressed in robes in the hallway, and and depicting this image of a monk that she created. And I thought that was the human brain is so powerful when it comes to these types of things. And so sometimes I think to myself, are these things out there that are in the world, like the creeper? Is it a tulpa? Is it something that we have created?
Right.
Because so many people with the power of the mind have thought about it. And like I said in the podcast, like we gave it a name, so now it has more power.
Yeah. Now you manifested it.
You manifested that because now it has a name. And I was like, that's one of the most powerful things. And you can learn that in the Bible, in a name. The name is super powerful.
I didn't ever know what a tulpa was until you just started talking about it. It's kind of funny, though. I kind of became a Prince fan after his death. I'm an 80s girl, but I wasn't a Prince fan then. Not that I didn't like his music, but I realized what an artist he was after his death. And it was just amazing. But he had been on a talk show and was talking about, I don't remember what the conversation or how it started, but it was to the extent of like, and I'm just going to throw a movie out there. He said, so you watched this Freddy Krueger movie? And they're like, well, yeah. And he goes, and now that's in your mind and you think about it. And he goes, well, yeah, I know about it. He goes, well, that image is in your mind forever. So I think he was kind of talking about whatever that conversation was, but it kind of connects with what you're saying, because if it's in your mind and you created it, whether you've seen it or you just thought it enough, you have now manifested that. And and Prince has said, that's going to be a part of you forever. So now you've created that and it'll be a part of you
and
forever.
Sometimes I think that's what like cryptids are, because like, let's hypothetically say like you go to the woods and you have a 5-year-old who gets scared because he thought he saw something. And so now he's told his friend who told their friend, and they're all thinking of this giant, hairy, big-footed creature, right? Yeah. So now you have millions of children and then it's also like Loch Ness or Nessie, to where when you see pictures or you see photos, right, it's something that's always a little bit different. Like nothing looks 100% the same. And I'm like, because you have all these different kids or like-minded adults describing something that is a little bit different. And now we're manifesting these type of creatures into the environment. I think, to me, I love the idea of a tulpa, but then it's kind of like, are we doing the same thing with spirits and ghosts or angels or devils? Like, are we doing the same thing with that? Is this something that we are just creating?
I think to a certain degree, it just depends on the person, but I think to a certain degree, we can manifest a lot of stuff. I've never been a real fan of psychics. They come to my town all the time. I think I seen the New York psychic, the lady with the big hair. And it
Oh,
was interesting.
Teresa. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was fun. I mean, it was entertaining. And then I had talked to one on the phone once, because I said my house is very active, but I kind of felt that I was kind of disconnected because I feel like you need to be in somebody's presence to be able to read them. But that could just be a me thing. But it was this, we had a booth at a Paracon in Jackson City, and we met this lady, Sarah Lemoyne, and she's getting kind of popular now, but she's making a name for herself now. But she was going to hold this little presentation to read people. We weren't even going to go, but like 5 minutes before it started, let's buy the ticket, we'll go. So we went in there, and it was small. It was only like 2 or 3 rows of people, maybe like 30 people in there. And so she was doing her thing, and all of a sudden she starts hitting. I had lost family members like back to back. My dad died, my daughter died, and then my mother died. It was like a year apart at best. So I had a lot going on in my head.
Yeah.
But then after a couple of people, she started talking about this woman that was having breathing problems. And it was weird because then somebody I knew started hitting me in the back because she knew my story a little bit. But I had never talked to Sarah. She didn't know my story. She didn't know who I was. We were just somebody at this Paracon. And she knew exactly how my mom passed. She knew every little detail about my daughter. My daughter was hit and killed by a car, but that's a bigger story as well. But she knew that it was in the evening time. She knew there was lots of paramedics. It was just a crazy scene. And then my dad was there and my brother. So she described all 4 people in like a matter of 10 minutes. And I was just like blown away. And I don't think I'll ever, like I said, I'm not a big fan of mediums because I have to take that with a grain of salt.
Yes.
Not saying that they're not real. But Sarah seemed to know everything. And that kind of made me more of a believer. So I think some of us need those experiences to go, yeah, there might be some to it. But if they're charging you a lot of money for their readings, it's just like, you could say that about Ghost Adventures and all them. When they start charging a lot of money and it becomes this bigger thing, then it makes you want to be more skeptical. So
yes,
that makes it very hard.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have met, I would say, a handful of people that I'm just kind of like, okay, well, there's no way you could have garnered that information, out of anything. So that does tend to make me, but I've also I remember, my father in Florida, he was also working like security type jobs. And I remember he met John Edwards, and he sat there and he said, look, like being there, meeting this guy, now there was no, like my dad confirmed he wasn't wearing an earpiece. Like no one was feeding him information, but my dad being he was a Scientology, like criminal psychology type major when he was in college and stuff. But he said the way that this guy pulls like just kind of words and looks at people's reactions to see what he would get, he was like, the cameras don't show you that. Yeah. Right. But my dad was there. He'd be like, look, that's the reason why I don't believe in particular in John Edwards. Just because of just seeing him play the crowd and seeing what he does. It's very magician like. It's very sleight of hand. And it's just reading people's like facial expressions and seeing what ticks and what doesn't, because, as human beings, we all do stuff with our faces or our bodies that we don't realize that we're actually doing when something ticks off in the brain. Yeah. So, it just kind of, I was reading, there was a comedy author that I love her books, named Lori Nataro. And she wrote a fiction book, and in it she talked about psychics, and someone was like, look, like in the world of psychics, the ones that are the phonies are the Madame Lavavia and all this kind of stuff. But if you meet a girl named Abby, look, that's it, right? Like it's, or just a plain name like Nancy. Nancy's a psychic. Watch out, like it'll be that one. But you don't want to get involved with these people who have these crazy, Transylvanian names.
And you don't want to get with people that are reading your future. I mean, I do kind of have a little kind of draw the line there too. We're really not meant to know the future. So I think when they start reading the future and they're like, this is going to happen to you, you're going to have 5 marriages. I would be a little bit wary of.
Well, and that's because, I mean, it's like, with, because I studied palm reading for a while, and, our palm lines change. It's tributaries. Like there are choices that we make every day in life that determine the outcome. At least this is what I believe. I believe that our futures are not like on set. Like there's nothing predetermined. Right. There are paths that
Right.
are outlines, and we have that free will, that choice, that
Right.
decision that could help determine which path we take.
Right.
That's what I choose to believe,
Yeah.
because I just think it's easier.
Well, when you go to church and they're like, well, God wrote every day of your life. Well, did God
Yeah.
write in that I was supposed to be mowed over by a big rig? I mean, did he
Yeah,
see that coming? But I think you're right. I think it's more of he gave us these paths to choose from,
Yeah.
so it's not so much that he wrote every day of your life that you're going to get mowed over by a big rig, not tomorrow. It's you have a choice to go down here. You could do good, or you could do bad, or you could do mediocre. It's really up.
Yeah.
I'm giving you free choice to make. You have all these choices. Which one are you going to make? So,
Yeah, I choose to live my life like a choose your own adventure book,
yeah.
And it, don't even get me wrong on that, because even as a kid, I'd get those books, I'd look at the back to see what certain endings were.
Right.
But even now I'm just kind of like my mom is really big into astrology.
Okay.
And she loves to do natal charts, and she'll hit me with something. She'll be like, "Oh, Colin, in this year, the stars are aligned here, here, and here, and this is what that kind of means in the world of astrology. So something really big." And I was just like, if it happens, I'll let you know. But
Yeah.
I don't. If it does, that's great. But I don't necessarily. I would prefer astrology over, other things, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
Because at least with the star charts and stuff, we can actually track that. Like that's something we can, physically look
Yeah.
at and glean from.
Yeah.
But
Well, our atmosphere and stuff does tell us stories about how weather's going to be and stuff. That's how people farmed back in the
yeah,
day. It's like that's how people
absolutely.
you could tell time. It wasn't because we had the convenient digital clock sitting right there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, I think that's why they made the farming atlas. So, yeah,
Yeah.
stars are, and how the moon is and the moon cycles and all
Mhm.
that really played a big part in, the life before us. So, yeah. Well, hey, we got probably about 5 more minutes here. So,
Okay. The earth is not flat, people. Just so you know. I don't know.
no, my friend would argue with that, but he just likes to argue in general. So it's my friend Yanko. he likes to bust my chops all the time. So I'm surprised he never comes on here and gives me a hard time. But is there anything else that you want people to know about what you guys do, how they can find you, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, just know that Jess and I both come from a very real place, as a believer and as a skeptic. And we would love to hear from you guys. That is the one thing that we put on every single episode, is that you guys can email us. We are Paranormal BS Podcast at gmail.com. You guys can give us fan submissions, tell us your stories, whether you're a skeptic or you're a believer. We love to look at the comments. We are full of Paranormal BS on all major platforms. You could find right now we have 5 episodes released. We release the first of every month. And we have a whole season planned out right now. And then we will have our second season air in February of next year. We're planning that out as well. And once again, the response has been absolutely wonderful. And I cannot thank you guys enough for following us on this journey, for allowing us to take this journey with you, and getting to know all of you. I think that is like the biggest thing here, is really understanding and knowing the community, and the love and the outpour that we get from it is absolutely amazing. So yeah, please follow us. And
so you guys are on Instagram, you're on
yes,
Facebook, your YouTube,
Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube.
And what about Spotify or anything like that?
Oh, yes. We are also on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. We are also on Amazon Podcasts. Yeah, all of that. Anything. Amazon Music is what it's called, not Amazon Podcast, but yeah, Amazon Music. We are on all of those. So yeah, you guys can find us out there. And like I said, please leave comments. We love responding to comments and just hearing the love that is out there. And just like I said, send us an email. I just used fan submissions for the first time in the Waverly episode. So that is something that we are adding and putting into it. And we love to hear from people. It's the most amazing thing to hear from people.
That's super awesome. All right. Okay, Colin, well, it was very nice meeting you. And I can't wait to do this again. And maybe next time we can get Jess to come on. So I'm going to put, yeah, it would be nice. We'll see what we can do, right? You said they're kind of camera shy?
Yes. Yeah, they are. That's the, Yep.
Well, we'll have to work on them. All right. Well, I'm going to put you in the waiting room. So stick around for a few minutes. Okay. All right. All right. Well, that was great. That was full of paranormal BS. That was a great conversation. I didn't really know what to expect. So yeah, that was awesome. I haven't got to talk to about a lot of those topics as far as psychics and things of that nature. So that was cool. So join us next Sunday on our 5 o'clock podcast. I'll be putting some promos out, and hopefully Ryan will be here next time to do all my stuff that I seem to screw up all the time. So have a good night. Toodles.